It was the summer of 1933, and the Rocky Mountain National Park was still young, wild, untamed, and only partly mapped. And in August of that year, a 22-year-old University of Chicago student set out on a solo hike. He told his friend he was heading towards Taylor Peak and that he'd be home soon. But he never came back, and his disappearance remains an unsolved mystery to this day. This is one of the oldest cases in Rocky Mountain National Park. Welcome to Morbid Outdoors, the podcast that ventures deep into the shadows of the wild. Here, we unravel the mysteries of missing persons, explore spine chilling legends, and share the most morbid stories that nature has to offer. From the depths of the dense forests to the highest mountain peaks, we'll uncover the secrets that lie hidden in the great outdoors. Join us as we navigate the eerie, the unexplained, and the terrifying. So if you dare, grab your gear and let's embark on a journey into the unknown. This is Morbid Outdoors. Hello, everyone. My name is Elise, and I'm your host. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I am feeling great. Today, I actually just got back from a over 5 mile hike at Antelope Island State Park in Salt Lake City, where I had to take a pretty large detour off of the trail because of bison. So, yes, if you didn't know, if you're in Salt Lake or you're ever visiting and you want to see bison out and about, you should go to Antelope Island State Park. There's a herd, lots of bison all over the island. And it's kind of like driving through Yellowstone in a way that there's not a lot of traffic, but you can still see bison pretty up close, except if you're hiking you do have to be a little extra careful because they will gore you. So I went on a beautiful hike, saw the Salt Lake, saw a coyote, some deer, some mice, and lots of bison. And they added a few extra length on my hike because I had to detour. So I'm feeling great. I hope that you're doing great today. And I hope that even though it's winter, you're still getting outside to enjoy some nature. Today, we're going to be talking about possibly the oldest missing persons case in Rocky Mountain National Park. So let me start with some negative reviews. Someone said, unfortunately, I didn't read ahead of time. I didn't realize I needed a permit before I drove up from Texas. And my 20 mile per gallon new GMC white Chevy truck pickup that's lifted my add. So now I have to leave a 1-star review because the education in my state is trash. Wait, I'm from Germany and I can research. Got in with no problem and enjoyed the fresh air, smoked a cigarette, and felt great about knowing how to read while taking in these one of a kind breathtaking views. I love that. I love that review. I think it's honestly hilarious and so accurate. So, that was this guy on Google named German David. Someone else said, pretty dumb that you can't even drive through the park without some reservation. This is the second time I've driven weeks to see the Rockies just for some park ranger to turn us away at the gate because an additional pass was sold out. Someone else said, couldn't get into the park because no time slots were available. This land is God's gift, and it is preserved land by the government. I have the right to enter anytime I please, and the right was given to me by a much higher power than a park ranger. Any individual who comes up with slash enforces these policies is a coward and an enemy of the people. Cowards. The soldiers fighting for our freedom should be livid about these time slots to visit land that's funded by taxpayer dollars. I'm disgusted in every way. Okay, I want to talk about why the comment or the review left by German David really tickled me. And in fact, I had recorded something else in the slot, but I it didn't come off really with what I wanted to say, so I'm re-recording this like 2 weeks later. So, I feel that German David, yes, it was kind of rude of him to make that review. I think it's hilarious. Some people might not, but I think he might have a point. And the reason I say that is that So often I see these negative reviews of national parks, and most of the reviews have to do with the visitor's ability to understand how to enter or get a reservation. And while I know it's confusing, I also know that a lot of people in the United States cannot read above a sixth grade level. Now, that is factual, so you can check me on that. But I'm starting to wonder, and German David kind of sparked my curiosity. Maybe the people that leave these negative reviews about the reservation system and about how they didn't understand or whatever, maybe they're not actually understanding the process it takes because they are poor readers. Now, I just want to throw this out there. I have nothing against people who are poor readers or don't know how to read or slow readers. That really doesn't say anything about you as a person, like about how kind you are or about how smart you are. It really doesn't say anything at all. But I work in public schools, and so I see this happening very often. We are in a literacy crisis in the United States of America. It is scary. And actually, in the state of Utah last week, a report just came out that says 50% of third graders cannot read on grade level. That is really concerning to me. But I think that German David might have had a point. Maybe the people that are leaving these reviews are not understanding or are not able to really read and understand the policies and directions for the national parks. Do I think that's the case for all of these negative reviews? No. Am I going to stop reading these negative reviews? No, because I find most of them highly entertaining and comical. But yeah, so I actually talked to my family members about the literacy crisis, and a lot of people don't really believe me until I pull up the statistics. So I just want to be factual here. So I'm going to pull them up right now just so that you're aware, because maybe you're not aware, maybe you don't care, and that's totally fine. You're not here to listen about literacy statistics, but German David brought up a really good point. As of 2025, according to the US Nations report card, only 35% of high school seniors are proficient at reading. So that is a fact, and that is really scary. As for adults, 54% of adults read below a sixth grade level. I'm not just like, this is not just, well, these kids, the younger kids, they can't read. No, it's also a lot of adults too. So I just want to throw that out there that maybe German David is onto something. I enjoyed his review and maybe he's right. I don't know. But we're really here today to discuss a missing persons case that is maybe the oldest in Rocky Mountain National Park. I might have said that. But when we go so far back into history, there's really not, I mean, like people might have gone missing in this area before it was a national park, and we just might not have those records. So I don't want to make a definite claim, but this is a very old cold case from Rocky Mountain National Park. So let's talk about the national park for a second. Rocky Mountain National Park is located about 55 miles or 89 kilometers northwest of Denver in Colorado. Now, it is within the Front Range of the Rocky Mountains, and the park is situated between the towns of Estes Park to the east and Grand Lake to the west. The main features of the park include obviously mountains, alpine lakes, and a wide variety of wildlife within various climates and environments. So, one of the most seen wildlife are the elk, and they are very popular to see within this national park. The Rocky Mountain National Park Act was signed by President Woodrow Wilson on January 26, 1915, establishing the park boundaries and protecting the area for future generations. And it is very, very popular. In 2023, 4.1 million recreational visitors entered this park alone. Rocky Mountain National Park is one of the most visited in the national park system, and it ranked as the third most visited national park in 2015. In 2019, the park saw record attendance yet again with 4.6 million visitors, which was a 44% increase since 2012. National forest lands surround this park on all sides, including the Roosevelt National Forest to the north and east, the Route National Forest to the north and west, the Arapaho National Forest to the west and south, and the Indian Peaks Wilderness area located directly south of this park. The history of Rocky Mountain National Park began when Paleo Indians traveled a route near what is now Trail Ridge Road to hunt and forage for food. Ute and Arapaho people subsequently hunted and camped in this area, and in 1820, the Long expedition, led by Stephen H. Long, for whom Long's Peak was named, approached the Rockies via the Platte River. Settlers began arriving in this area in the mid 1800s, which displaced the indigenous people by 1878. This park encompasses 265,461 acres of federal land, with an additional 253,000 acres of U.S. Forest Service wilderness adjoining the park boundaries. The Continental Divide runs generally north to south through the center of Rocky Mountain National Park, with rivers and streams on the western side of the divide flowing towards the Pacific Ocean and those on the eastern side flowing towards the Atlantic Ocean. Rocky Mountain National Park is lush and full of water. This park contains approximately 450 miles or 724 kilometers of rivers and streams, 350 miles or 563 kilometers of trails, and 150 lakes. Rocky Mountain National Park is one of the highest national parks in the nation, with elevations that range from 7,860 feet to 14,259 feet, or 2,396 meters to 4,346 meters. And the highest point in the park is Long's Peak, like I mentioned earlier, that was named after Stephen H. Long. There are 60 mountain peaks over 12,000 feet or 3,658 meters, and these all provide scenic vistas while hiking. In terms of weather, obviously at higher elevations, they receive much more precipitation and snow than lower elevations. There are Arctic conditions that are prevalent during the winter with sudden blizzards, high winds, and deep snowpack. High country overnight trips require gear suitable for negative 35 degrees Fahrenheit or below. The subalpine region does not begin to experience spring like conditions until June, which is basically like, I don't know, like midsummer, basically. Wildflowers bloom from late June to early August. So that is a very popular time to visit the park is June to August for the wildflower, and most of the snow is melted at higher elevations for hiking. Because of all the water and how green it is, there are lots of mammals that inhabit Rocky Mountain National Park, which include snowshoe hares, coyotes, cougars, beavers, mule deer, moose, bighorn sheep, black bears, and Rocky Mountain elk. During the fall, especially, visitors often flock to the park to witness the elk rut. And I've actually seen that, but not in Rocky Mountain National Park. Where I'm from in Arkansas, in the northern part of the state, we do have elk there too, and you can just pull over to the side of the road and watch them run, which is really cool, and it's very loud. So, because there's a lot of water in this park, there's also a lot of fish. There are four trout species that inhabit the park, which include the rainbow, brook, cutthroat, and German brown trout. Rocky Mountain National Park is extremely rugged depending on where you go within the park. And because of this, and we talked about the high elevation, that means there are steep cliffs everywhere. And according to data from the National Park Service, there have been 77 fatalities at the park between 2007 and 2024, the majority of which were accidental falls while hiking or climbing. So these hikes and terrain are no joke. People fall and get lost or die in this national park. It seems like all the time. I swear in the summer, every other week, I'm reading a news article about Rocky Mountain National Park. And part of that has to do with it is very frequented by tourists. And the other part is this terrain is really no joke and not for the inexperienced. And that brings us to our case today. We are going to discuss the disappearance of Joe Halpern. So, First and foremost, Joe was born Joseph Halpern, and he was born September 11th, 1910. And him and his family decided to go on a road trip from their home and around Chicago to out west. And they decided they were going to see Yellowstone and the Black Hills and Rocky Mountain National Park. So Joe and his parents, Fanny and Solomon, they went on a road trip and they also brought one of Joe's friends. Now, this guy's name was Samuel Garrick, and he was actually the brother of Joe's best friend, Isidore. Now, Isidore couldn't make the trip, so Sam went in his place. And Bernard, which is Joe's brother, also could not come, so he stayed back home as well. So it wasn't really the full group that they were hoping to go, but there were 4 of them that went. So, they did some traveling out west. They went to Yellowstone and the Black Hills, and Joe really wasn't an experienced outdoorsman, and in fact, all of his experience in the outdoors had been on this trip. So, basically, only when he was hiking in the Black Hills. At this point in Joe's life, he was a University of Chicago student and he was actually working on getting his doctorate degree. Joe was extremely talented and he was fluent in multiple languages, including American English, and he was also gifted in chemistry and astronomy. So he loved sciences and languages, and honestly, he sounded pretty smart. So he and his friend Sam, they were deciding that they were gonna go on a hike, and they did. So they drove to the Bear Lake parking area and set off on a day hike via the Flat Top Mountain Trail. They were hoping to summit Flat Top Mountain and then come back down to meet, Joe's parents at their campground, which is like Glacier View Campground within Rocky Mountain National Park. Now, they were in the park at the right time of year because it was August 15th, 1933, and they are enjoying the wildflowers, the snow being gone, and the warmer days with like moderately cool nighttime temps. So, while going on this hike, they decided they needed to bring some food and snacks. So, they carried 4 or 5 sandwiches, 1 orange, 2 bananas, and a recent Rocky Mountain National Park motorist guide map, and they all packed this in a small gray knapsack and they departed for their hike. And I just want to point out that Rocky Mountain National Park was only 18 years old at this time since it was established in 1915. So it was less than 20 years old. It's pretty rugged and there's the roads through this national park just were basically finished that allowed more accessibility within the park. So this is like brand new, fresh baby national park, and these 2 guys are going to go summit a mountain. By mid-afternoon that day, both Joe and Sam had made it to the top of Flat Top Mountain, and Joe actually wanted to continue his hike, and he wanted to go to Taylor Peak. Now, unfortunately, Sam was kind of done with hiking for the day, and Sam tried to get Joe to come back with him to the parking lot, and Joe really did not want to. He was mesmerized by the trails, the scenery, and the Rocky Mountains. And so he decided, I'm going to go quickly, go over to Taylor Mountain, and then I'll meet back up with you in the parking lot. So they went their separate ways around 2:30 p.m. and they planned to meet back at the Bear Lake trailhead. And I'm just going to remind you that Joe was inexperienced and it was immediately concerning to his family that he had gone off alone. I think it's interesting that Sam also was like, "Okay, yeah, let's split up." Maybe it was a different time. I think in today's time, that would not really be an option for a lot of people. We would be like, I especially, am like, "No, I am not leaving you. I have seen the movies, I have listened to the podcasts, and we are not separating at all on whatever hike we're on." I'm also hyper vigilant, so maybe that's a part of it, but basically, Sam and Joe just thought it was no big deal, and they decided to meet back up. Now, Sam got to the trailhead at 6:30 PM and waited, and hours passed. 3 hours passed, and there was still no sign of his friend Joe. So he did the right thing, the smart thing, and he called for a ranger. Immediately, there was a concern that Joe was lost or had gotten injured, and so a search started that night around 10 p.m. Rangers took electric lights and they were looking for any sight or listening for any sound of Joe. Now, obviously, everybody was concerned at first, and most people thought, we're going to find him. He's probably just lost. So, no one knew if Joseph was lost, injured, or had already plunged to his death off a cliff. But park rangers actually got a lot of people together for the search. There were at least 150 volunteer searchers, including CCC workers, and all of these people combed the mountainous terrain by foot and on horseback. Now, remember 1933, they did not use a plane to search in this search. I'm not sure why, but they were doing what they could with hiking and with horses. So, park rangers, they of course questioned Sam and other hikers that had seen Joe while hiking. And they went back up to where Sam and Joe kind of said their goodbyes and said, I'll meet you at the parking lot. And they said, show us which way that Joe went. And they said towards Taylor Peak, but it was the wrong direction. So it's possible that Joe thought he was going to hike to Taylor Peak and he actually was heading toward Chief's Head Peak. So at 13,579 feet, Chief's Head is the third highest peak within the entire park. It has a northwest wall and it's a sheer granite cliff that plunges from its summit more than 1,000 feet. So everyone started to be worried, really, really worried at this point because the direction that they thought Joe went to was not the direction that he actually did. Sam also stated that it was possible that Joe might have headed toward Andrews Glacier. According to the chief ranger's report, which contained the above conflicting statements that, like, he went here, no, he went here, actually, he might have gone here. No one could really say which way Joe had gone. Like, no one really knew for sure. And midway into the search, Joseph's father, Solomon, wrote to his other son, Bernard. And this is the brother that stayed home in Chicago. And this is what Solomon wrote to him, quote, 4 days of helpless agony and no end to it, which is heartbreaking. I mean, you're going on this road trip, you're having a great time, you're enjoying nature and the outdoors, you're getting to see more of America as a Russian immigrant father, and your son goes missing. And it is so, so, so sad and so scary. So, park authorities checked all the registers on Taylor and the other nearby peaks, but none of the registers had Joseph's signature or name. Officials debated bringing in bloodhounds, but they couldn't locate any nearby, so bloodhounds were not used in the search. Now, it's good that it was August because it was nice weather during the day, but the weather actually got down to 40 degrees Fahrenheit at nights and also had rain and windstorms. And the search went on for 6 days, and it reached its end. They determined that there's no way that Joe could still be alive after spending 6 days in these mountains, possibly injured, with little to no food or water. So they called the search off, and Sam wrote to his brother, which is Joe's friend Isidore, and he said, I've got some tragic news. Joe Halpern disappeared in the mountains last Tuesday, and nothing has been heard from him since. Sam also included in the letter that these last couple of days of searching had been miserable out here with deadly gloom prevailing. And he also noted that Joe's mom, Fanny, cried all night long every night. And the search, from what I saw online, was pretty extensive. They had many volunteers, they had workers, and they had park rangers. and Joe's family all out looking for Joe for days on end. I mean, they searched everywhere. They summited all of the peaks. They even went down into the nearby city of Grant City, I think it was, and they did not find a single thing, or Grant Lake, that's the city. They did not find a single thing of Joe's. They didn't find Joe. They didn't find the knapsack, none of his clothing, his shoes, nothing. It was like he vanished into thin air. It really broke his parents' heart that they went out there for fun and then their son got lost. And the day that the search was called off, August 21st, 1933, is the day that they and Sam left for Chicago. There wasn't really anything else they could do. They had to leave knowing that they might never know what happened to Joe. Joe's parents couldn't believe their son was still missing, and it was hard for them to accept it. So they actually started their own investigation. They were grief stricken parents, and they desired to better understand Joe after his disappearance. They asked for the letters that Joe had sent to Isidore or Ed, and in October 1934, Solomon Halpern sent a letter back to Isidore with a shocking claim. He said, Joe is alive, or at least it's highly probable he is. Now, Joe's parents, they clung to the idea that Joe was tired of academia and school, and they also said he was worried about money. So, Joe had in previous letters mentioned like he had a desire for a life of a sailor or a transient. And his parents really like looked into that and they thought Joe was unhappy and that, Joe's disappearance was him getting out of his life, leaving it behind for a life more simple. And that's that was their that was their theory that Joe had staged his own disappearance to leave his life behind. And of course, with every missing persons case, there are going to be sightings. So in 1934, an acquaintance visited Fanny and Solomon, and they saw a picture of Joe in their house. They didn't know who he was or what had happened to him, and the acquaintance claimed that he actually saw Joe in the winter of 1933 begging for a meal outside of a restaurant in Phoenix, Arizona. And this was big news for Fanny and Solomon Halpern. They sent his picture to the restaurant owner who gave it to the Phoenix police. The police then showed it to boys in a local transient camp who said that yes, Joe had been there months earlier under a different name. Now, this is all coming from a letter that Solomon Halpern wrote. So, this really ignited, the flame of hope. And the Halperns, they looked into this. I mean, they were doing their own investigation and they were really hopeful that this was Joe and maybe he thought, maybe he had hit his head, he had got amnesia and wandered out of the park, or because he didn't want to do school anymore and was worried about money, he slipped away and he hitchhiked out of the park and started his transient life that he had talked about in earlier letters to his friend Isidore. There was another lead that Joe had joined a circus and that he was going under another name, but that didn't really pan out. And the police looked into it, but the age of this person that they thought was Joe didn't match with Joe's age. So there were like a couple of leads that might have been something, but turned out not to really be anything or materialize into any confirmed sighting of Joe. To this day, no trace of Joe Halpern has ever been found, and his case is the oldest missing persons case entered into NamUs. So that is crazy. And the reason why he was entered into NamUs is because his nephew, Roland, has kind of taken the torch to find out what happened to his uncle, Joe. And I just want to throw this out there. So from 2026, the year we're in now, to 1933 is 93 years. Joe Halpern has been missing in Rocky Mountain National Park for 93 years. One of the park rangers who participated in the initial search was a man named Jack Moomaw, and he was the author of Recollections of a Rocky Mountain Ranger. And when asked about Joseph in his book, he stated, quote, "Some people, including the parents, are of the opinion that the missing boy may have lost his mind and wandered away. But I believe that, somewhere up in those barrens, the wind is moaning through his bones." Joe's parents never gave up looking and hoping that Joe would be found somehow or somewhere. And Bernard Halpern, which was Joe's brother, Bernard died in 1998. And his son, Roland, basically started where Bernard left off of trying to find answers on where Joe was or what happened to Joe that fateful August day in 1933. Roland has hundreds of letters, piles of documents, maps, and official reports. And he's searching for the one thing that his dad and his grandparents had never been able to find, which was closure. All of them went to their graves not knowing what happened to Joe. And so Roland is here 93 years later trying to find out what happened to Joe. He's looking for answers and he's looking for closure for his entire family. So, in an interview, Roland said that his father was very stoic. And growing up, Roland never really heard a lot about Joe. He never met him, but the only thing that he heard as a kid is that Bernard told him, "Don't go hiking alone because that's what happened to my brother and he disappeared." Roland was born almost 20 years after Joe went missing in Rocky Mountain National Park, and so he never knew the circumstances until 1998. He's undertaken an investigation into his family mystery, and he's wrangled every piece of evidence and information his father kept about Joe, and he's been tracking down old letters that Joe had written back and forth to his best friend, Isidore Garrick, in the early 1930s. He's also found letters that show his father, Bernard, quietly kept searching for his little brother. Over the years, there have been many remains that have been found within Rocky Mountain National Park. And every time Roland hears of some, he has hope that it could be Joe, but it never is. And he says while the theories intrigue him, Roland said that he doesn't actually subscribe to any of these remote theories. He thinks that Joe never left the park. He thinks that Joe's remains are still out there somewhere waiting to be found. So Joe is still missing and Roland is still searching for answers. And Joe's case is not the only case that has not been solved within Rocky Mountain National Park. There have been many other people who have gone missing who have never been found, or their remains were found like almost 40 years later. In fact, 16 years after Joe vanished in October 1949, Colorado A&M students Bruce Gerling and David DeVitt, they both went missing after separating from their hiking group, also in the same area, Flat Top Mountain, and no trace of them has ever been found. Now, Joe is one of 7 people in this national park's history to have disappeared without a single trace. I think that number needs to be updated because when I was doing online research, some people have been found, but all in all, there's like 4 to 6 that have not. And I don't know the true number. It's difficult to track because, as you know, the National Park is National Park Service is not great about keeping records about missing persons, especially if they're just never found. One of these people who have never been found was Alfred Beale Hartz, and he went missing July 2nd, 1938. He was 4 years old at the time, and he vanished during a family outing. Early assumptions focused on him drowning, but no confirmed evidence of his fate was found. There was a report of a child's cry from a ridge that went unverified, and subsequent searches were unsuccessful. His disappearance remains among the park's listed unresolved historical cases. That is so sad, and that happens often with young children. In March of 2019, a 70-year-old went missing. His name was James Pruitt, and park rangers found his vehicle parked at the Glacier Gorge trailhead along the popular Bench Lake Road. There was a search for him, but it was suspended March 15th after persistent snow and strong winds hindered their effort. He has never been found. And then in 2023, Chad Palanch went missing while he was on a trail run. This happened September 28th, 2023, and he was doing a 28-mile loop run crossing the Continental Divide. He was partly off trail and through steep terrain in the heart of the park's backcountry. His last known location was near the summit of Mount Alice, which is southwest of Long's Peak. The search for Chad was suspended October 10th, 2023, and he has never been found either. Now, just last July in 2025, there was a family that was visiting from Illinois, and they found human remains while hiking in Rocky Mountain National Park, which is so scary. This apparently they were found in June, but the story was reported in July. It is so sad because there were kids that were there, and the kid actually wandered about 200 yards off trail, and that's when they found the remains. According to the family, they were skeletal remains, and the family described the remains they saw as having a detached leg lying face down. Now, these remains still have not been identified. Park rangers obviously got right on it. They cleared out the area, and it was confirmed that these were, in fact, human remains. Park rangers said that there are no known missing persons cases that match the remains, and at this time, they did not believe that the death was suspicious. But even to this day, these remains have not been found, which is honestly concerning because someone is has died out here. Their remains are out here, skeletal remains, and nobody knows who they belong to. And from what I saw online, these remains were not found like in a remote area. They were actually pretty close to like civilization, within this national park, just 200 yards off trail. So no one knows who they are yet. I've been waiting ever since I saw that news article last summer. Like, oh, someone went up there in the winter and they died. But no, still do not know whose body this is. And it's honestly really concerning because it's been like 7 months and nobody knows yet. Another person that went missing within this national park was Rudy Motor. He was 27 years old and he was actually on a solo backcountry ski trip and he went missing in 1983. His food pack was later found, but Rudy remained missing until 2020. So he was missing for 38 years. He was very experienced and he was actually living in Fort Collins, Colorado at the time of his disappearance. In the end, the disappearance of Joe Halpern is one of Rocky Mountain National Park's oldest and most haunting mysteries, a case frozen in the thin air of August 1933 and never truly thawed. Searchers combed in the high country for days. They found no gear, no torn clothing, no footprints, no camp, and no sign of a struggle. It was as if Joe simply stepped off the trail and dissolved into the granite and sky. And what makes Joe's story so unsettling is the sheer scope of the search compared to the absolute absence of answers. Hundreds of people looked for him. Rangers tracked every possible route. Experienced mountaineers examined cliffs and snowfields. But Joe was never found. Not then, not later, not even decades afterwards, as melting snowpack exposed long hidden ground. And so the park is left with only theories that he slipped into a crevice or a hidden chasm, that he fell in terrain too remote to be searched, or that something stranger happened in the wilderness that day. Nearly a century later, hikers still pass through the same valleys, the same ridgelines, the same silent places that Joe once walked. Most have no idea a mystery lies beneath their feet, but Rocky Mountain National Park remembers. And so do the rangers who still talk about the case as the one of the park's greatest unanswered questions. Joe Halpern went into the mountains alone, hoping for adventure and solitude. What happened after that remains locked in the landscape, part of the long, unnerving history of people who vanish in America's wildest places. As with so many cases we cover here, we're left with one truth: the mountains keep their secrets well. At the time of his disappearance, Joe was 22 years old. He's a white male, 5'8", 165 pounds, with brown eyes and brown hair. He was wearing a light blue shirt or a white shirt with blue stripes, light brown pants, and heavy shoes. He wasn't wearing a hat. Authorities are no longer actively investigating Joe's case due to the passage of time, but they have taken DNA from his relatives to identify his body if it is ever located. If you have tips or find anything, you can call the Colorado Bureau of Investigation at 303 239 5764. And obviously, if you ever find human remains or anything you think could be involved in a missing persons case, there is a phone number you can call or text, and it goes to the National Park Service Investigative Services Bureau, and its number is 888-653-0009. Just want to remind you that if you ever find human remains or ripped or torn clothing or anything that you get a feeling could be involved, do not touch it. Take a picture, note where it's at on your maps, and immediately alert law enforcement, i.e. the park rangers in this case. As always, recreate responsibly and remember, sometimes the great outdoors aren't always great. Thanks for listening to Morbid Outdoors. If you're enjoying what you're hearing, make sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform. It's free, easy, and it helps us out immensely. When you subscribe, you get updates on our latest episodes, and it also boosts our visibility, making it easier for other curious souls to find us. Another great way to support Morbid Outdoors is by leaving us a review. Whether you're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen, a quick review helps us know what you love about the show. You can also join us on Patreon for early and ad-free content. Find us on Instagram and Facebook at Morbid Outdoors Podcast. You can email us case suggestions and your campfire stories at morbidoutdoorspodcast@gmail.com. Thanks so much for the support, and I'll see you next time.